dream is good. Coming to y'all in 5.
Everybody, welcome back to the Travi Wavi. I'm your affable host, Travis Eason, and we have a really special Travi Wavi this afternoon on a Wednesday at 4. But don't forget that we do these generally Thursday mornings at 10, and you're always welcome to come down, join us in our live audience. It's wonderful to see some of you out there today. Thanks for being here today. And we will have another wonderful guest tomorrow morning at 10, so come on down if you want to check it out. The Neon Parrot Live Studios is where we host the Travi Wavi every week. We're located next door to Majestic Coffee Shop in historic downtown Abilene, Texas, the storybook capital of America, and we would love to have you subscribe, like, share, let your friends and family know that this is something that we're doing every week. I try to bring you wonderful characters from the storybook capital of Texas, and I think I grabbed a really good one today, Hawk Dunlap.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited that you're here, man.
I am too. I appreciate you making the time. This is great.
So you are running for Railroad Commission.
I am.
And we're going to get into all the details. We've got a whole hour that we're going to talk about all this. But before we get started, let me ask you the question I ask all of my guests. Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a sister. She's 6 years older than I am. I'm scared to death of her. She runs marathons for fun and trains for triathlons. And I think she's doing a 48-hour run this weekend down in Houston. Mercy. Yeah, so I'm deathly afraid of her.
Yeah, that running for fun is always terrifying to me.
I wouldn't run across the parking lot for a free cheeseburger.
I'm going to run away from something before I'm running for fun. Well, Hawk, I reached out to you on TikTok. I've been following your campaign a little bit over the last couple weeks, months, and you were so pleasant to let me know that you'd be welcome to join me on the Travi Wavi, and I'm just really grateful for that today. So thank you for your time.
No, I'm glad to be here. This place is awesome.
It's a fun old building.
It is. It really is.
So you were in Midland, Odessa earlier today?
I was. I was on the radio for about 15, 20 minutes this morning, and then I did a Republican women's event at the country club in Midland, and then hooked them and came over here to see you. I'll have to be in Jasper in East Texas tomorrow. So I'll hook them and drive as far as I can tonight and put my head down somewhere and keep going tomorrow.
Heard you had a hard time finding a spot in Abilene last night. There weren't any hotel rooms available.
Yeah, we left out of East Texas yesterday morning, and we're gonna put our head down in Abilene, and the hotel rates were just astronomical.
$400 a night.
Yeah, insane. And ended up in Sweetwater, and barely got a room in Sweetwater. And we checked out this morning. I asked what was going on, and I couldn't think of any kind of big function or anything that was happening in Abilene, and they said it was because of the data centers and the construction.
The Stargate Lancium project has really been an issue for our housing in town. We can maybe talk about that a little bit later too as we get into it. So give me your spiel a little bit. You've been campaigning. You're out on the trail. We've got early voting next week.
Early voting starts February 17th.
And voting is March 3rd.
March the 3rd.
Okay. And we're working on trying to elect you for Railroad Commissioner, which is a bit of a misnomer.
Right.
Because the Railroad Commission doesn't do anything with railroads anymore.
Have anything to do with trains.
So what does the Railroad Commission do?
They regulate oil and gas in Texas, intrastate pipelines, which are pipelines that start in Texas and end in Texas, and surface mining for things like coal.
Okay. And what's your relationship been with the Texas Railroad Commission? How did you first kind of see this as a plight that you could run, that you could maybe make a difference about?
Well, if I back up, I grew up in East Texas, in the East Texas oil field, and I'm fourth generation. So when I was younger, everybody knew who the Railroad Commission was. And as life happened, and I ended up moving overseas, and I pretty much stayed and worked overseas for 27 years. And I came back to Texas through a series of events, and I got involved with some landowners in West Texas, and they were showing me issues that they had. And my first words out of my mouth was, well, why don't you call the Railroad Commission? Back when I was younger, Railroad Commission people were guys that are about my age now that had worked in the field their whole life, were getting kind of close to retirement, needed to get some retirements and some benefits to carry them in so they could fish the rest of their life. And they were well-seasoned people, and they hated paperwork, and they got more done on the telephone. And that was my impression of the Railroad Commission. And so when I came back and I made that statement, everybody laughed at me. And it wasn't long before I figured out exactly, what they were laughing about. The Railroad Commission has taken up the business of promoting the oil and gas industry instead of regulating the oil and gas industry, which I find to this day very strange.
Yeah.
The industry doesn't need cheerleaders. They pat themselves on their back, and they do good work in some things. But we need an agency to regulate and not just let these companies run amok.
So you said Railroad Commission handles things in Texas. Does it do anything with the Gulf also?
Yeah, in shallow water.
In shallow water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you're fourth generation oil and gas. You've been in your entire adult life. You've been in the industry.
Yes.
And from what I've read about you in Houston Chronicle, Bloomberg News, and some other articles, you're kind of a fixer. Is that true?
Yeah, that's I got into the business when I was going to college. So I worked my way through college in the oil business, and then I went off around the world, and then I got to working for companies like Boots and Coots and Wild Well Control, who fight oil fires and do blowouts, and we got to see and work on some of the most difficult oil and gas well incidents around the planet, and you learn a lot. And so we never really got to go anywhere where everything was just, standard straight away. We got to, you had to think a lot, and we had some great engineers to help us through, and so you learn a lot, and you see a lot of tough situations, and you work your way out of it. And that's kind of where we are today in regards to, the zombie wells, the orphan wells, and with our water. We are in a tough situation right now, and at a crossroads, so to speak, as a state and as an industry, and we're going to have to start making some hard decisions and turning things around, or we're just never going to recover from it.
So to put this in a little bit more context for our audience who may not be familiar with zombie wells, orphan wells, how the oil and gas industry has left some problems for us to solve. So we were talking before we went live today, oil and gas industry has been in Texas since at least 100 years, 19-something Spindletop, and we drill into the earth to find oil reserves, West Texas crude, et cetera, pump it out, refine it, goes in your car, goes in your lawnmower, your plastic forks made out of it, right? And then you were mentioning back in the 40s or 50s, we learned how to do some horizontal drilling.
Well, back in the 30s, they called it slant hole drilling, and that was when you had a lease and your neighbor had a lease, and you wanted to drill into his lease, so you bent a piece of pipe and you drilled into it, and it was illegal at the time, and they called it slant hole drilling. And people went to jail for that. And now we call it horizontal drilling. Horizontal drilling.
and I remember when I first moved to Texas in like 2001, fracking had really kind of become something that was a topic, and excess natural gas, and it seemed like the industry kind of caught a new wave, so to speak. Is that kind of a true statement?
Yeah, with the shale boom. The fracking has been around since the 40s, okay? And simply put, fracking is pumping water under high pressure with sand and gel. And so you crack the rock with the high pressure water, and then you mix the sand and the gel together, and the sand and the gel go into the cracks in the rock and kind of hold that space to allow the hydrocarbons to flow into the wellbore. So, fracking's been around for almost 100 years. What we had with the shale revolution is we had very, very thin layers of pay. We were able to drill them horizontally, and we were able to do more hydraulic fracturing with higher rates and volumes of fluid and higher pressures, and we became kings of that. And we wouldn't be here where we are today without it.
Yep.
And as we were speaking earlier, the process of hydraulic fracturing is not necessarily the problem. Is what we're seeing today. That problem starts long before in the well construction and the cementing of the casing strings. The biggest problem that we're facing is with the produced water. So when you pump all this volume of fluid to fracture the rock, it comes back to surface, and you have to dispose of that. Same thing when we put a well into production. You make a certain amount of barrel of oil. Let's say you make a barrel of oil, and you have 3 to 5 barrels of produced water associated with that oil. So you have to dispose of that too. And historically, we've been injecting it in the ground.
Putting it right back where it came from.
Not necessarily. You can't. And the shale is a very, very tight rock, and you can't re-inject this water back into the shale. So you have to find a more permeable formation to inject that to. So you drill deep injection wells, and you start pumping into those. And so what we found is with the earthquakes is that we lubricate these faults, and the faults shift, and that's what starts giving our seismic activity. So over the last couple of years, we've shut in a lot of our deep well injection, and we've moved it back to shallow injection, like in the Central Basin Platform. Well, I've been drilling there for almost 100 years, and we have a lot of these old legacy well bores there. These wells were not constructed to withstand the additional pressure from all the over-injection. And from my experience on the Antenna Ranch, these wells the steel was 70 years old. So it's been sitting there slowly rusting and deteriorating.
Fissures.
Some of them weren't plugged properly. And so you add all this added pressure to it, it finds these old legacy well bores, and it starts to manifest its surface, and that's what gives you the zombie well phenomenon.
I like to think about this. So I've been trying to think of a good analogy about what's happening, but I guess if I go back to when I was, a child, and you had a glass of milk and a straw, and if you blow, what happens? Like bubbles start to come up in the milk, right? And I'm thinking this is kind of similar process to what's happening. It's just it's not coming out of the glass next to the borehole or the legacy borehole, but maybe this is happening miles away, hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, the pressure wave of injection can travel for miles underground. I've read one study that it's gone up between 12 miles away from the injection to where it's manifested. I went on a blowout in Toya, which was a very it was highly. It was high in H2S. It was over 200 parts per million H2S.
What is H2S?
Hydrogen sulfide.
Not a good
No,
it'll
kill you. Yeah. I ended up having to put a breathing apparatus on to get to look at the well. And this was over in Pecos County. And the investigation sorted out that the well was blowing out because of an injection well 3.5 miles away.
Wow.
So you have pressure moves in a wave, and it over a period of time, and it found this well that was drilled in 1961. It had 7,000 feet of open hole, 4,000 feet of casing. Only had 1, maybe 2 plugs in the well, and that had deteriorated over time. And the pressure found the well, and it started blowing out. And you could see it from I-20, and there's a great video on my TikTok and Facebook on that, and you can kind of see what's going on. And once they figured out exactly what happened, they shut that injection off, and they rigged up and capped the well and diverted it, and ended up killing it and replugging it. But it just goes to show you that just because you've got an injection well way over here, that it doesn't necessarily won't affect other old legacy wells in a different area.
So, again, just trying to get some more perspective on this for our audience. So I know you've got some friends out there. One of these, Chevron just bought 2,200 acres off of
22,000.
22,000 acres.
22,000.
Which of a landowner who was having issues with blowouts and things of this nature, and there's litigation. And instead of this was the compromise at the end of the day. We'll just buy it and make it our problem again.
Right. And that's what got me out to West Texas. And that landowner had 3 plugged wells that had already blown out on that ranch. I looked around. At the time, the shallow abnormal pressures that they were telling me about, and certain things, and the way things looked, I didn't have my head around it in early 2022 when I first got out there. But I knew something was not right. It just didn't feel right. There were water wells that were flowing really highly saturated brine water to surface. There were anomalies at surface that you could see, dead mesquites around where some of these old wells had been plugged.
And
You know,
mosquito live anywhere.
you can't kill mesquite,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that was really one of the first things that caught my attention. It was all these dead mesquites, and I said, I'm from East Texas and never had to deal with it, but I've heard my whole life these things you just don't kill them.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that caught my eye in the beginning. And the landowner asked me, he said, how do we know that we don't have any more? And I said, well, the only way to know is to dig them up. And I said, you've got a backhoe on the ranch. Yes, we should dig a few up. And so it was, several months after I'd made another trip to Nigeria on a blowout and came back, and I said, okay, we'll dig them up. And I really thought that it was only going to be, I'm from the industry, and so I was really on the industry. So I just said, what do you think the failure rate is? And I literally said, 25% tops. The first 7 wells that we dug up on that ranch, they were all leaking. And they were either leaking crude oil, they were leaking produced water, or they were leaking gas, or they were leaking all 3. And after 7 wells, I stopped and I said, this is a bigger problem than what I suspected it was. We had a hard time finding the wells to begin with. Some of them were real easy. We called them grave markers. There'd be a pole sticking out of the ground with the well name on it. Other ones were not so easy, and so we started trying to use the Railroad Commission documents in their GIS system, and there was discrepancies there. There was one well we were looking for. I dug so much it looked like a mass grave.
Oh man!
And we found it 400 yards off from where it said on the GIS system. We ended up having to bring in some older guys that were surveyors, and they used aerial imagery from the 50s and 60s and overlaid the ranch, and then they went out in side-by-sides, and they went out and marked the wells, and then we started getting a lot more success. Overall, we dug up 150 wells on that 22,000 acres, and I believe there was 335 wells total on that ranch. But the 120 that belonged to Chevron, that's what was tied up in the litigation.
So I think, to me, as a observer and a bystander, it seems pretty obvious what's happening is that we've either not followed the law and regulation that was set up to take care of these wells in the past, or there's just been complete neglect.
I would like to say that I believe, for the most part, with the exception of several wells on that ranch, that those wells were plugged at the time appropriately. Okay. Now there were some Chevron wells where I pulled a cross tie out. There was a Chevron wells where I pulled a fence post out. And what folks need to understand is back in the day, plugging a well was like a salvage job. So the plugging companies would get the salvage of the well. They would get the pump jacks. They would get the sucker rods. They get the tubing and whatever casing they could recover, and they would salvage it. And if they could sell it for reuse for big money, fine. If they couldn't, they'd scrap it. And so cementing the well was secondary. Okay, they made their money off of the salvage, and we still have a bit of that today, but not as much. But nobody ever really considered that when they plugged these wells in the late 60s and 70s, that 50 years down the road that we were going to be injecting all this produced water in the Central Basin Platform.
Yep.
And these legacy wells weren't designed for that. These were relatively shallow, 2,500 feet, 2 strings of casing, and they've been in the ground for 70 years. And so we added pressure and we added all of this external forces on these wells and started causing them to fall. When the crane geyser blew out in 2022 that got me over here, and then the next one in December 7th of 23, nobody was starting to realize that injection was causing the problem. And to this day, we're still injecting. Now, we
Yeah.
may not be injecting as much in that area anymore. They may have tapered off. They may have picked back up. But nonetheless, the underlying cause for the majority of these failures is produced water injection.
From the pressure.
Right.
And you said I mean, the water's brackish. It's got salt in it, so that can't be
Oh,
good for any metal.
Well,
that's in
and
contact
here's
with
the
either.
thing, and a lot of that water that's coming back is fully saturated. So water weighs 8.3 pounds per gallon. When water is fully saturated with salt, it's 10.1 pound per gallon, and then the salt starts to fall out. So where this ranch sits on 1,000 feet of salt called the Salado Salt Formation. So all of this injection has where they were injecting has turned the corner, has found fractures, has started to wash out the salt. It picks up salt, it gets fully saturated, and then it moves off and it starts finding these legacy wellbores and starts to manifest its surface. There was also an issue with one of the zones out there that was not cemented properly or cemented at all. And it is a natural nitrogen-bearing formation, and so that gave us a little bit of drive as well. So there were several different methods of pressure that we were seeing out there that was giving us fits. And the only time I had ever seen any natural occurring nitrogen in the ground was in Saudi Arabia over in the Subcas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you're kind of painting a picture of a little bit of a nightmare scenario for Texans in a way. I mean, this is we're already seeing. I mean, besides the blowouts, I know I can't remember the name of it, but there's a multi-thousand acre lake that's been formed.
Well,
multi-hundred acre lake.
It's I think it's around 60, 70 acres. Lake Beamer.
Right.
Yeah. And Lake Beamer is part of the story, but it has a different aspect to it. Lake Beamer was drilled as an oil and gas exploration well.
Okay.
It was determined to be not commercially viable, so it was plugged back, and it was perforated in a freshwater zone and handed over to the landowner. And the landowner used it for irrigation, and which was normal back then. And that's done with a one-page form called a P13 form.
Okay.
So basically, it is a oil and gas operator handing a well over to a landowner, and the liability of that well to plug it at a later date. It's one page, and they sign at the bottom, and there you go. The interesting thing about Beamer is that it made beautiful water for a very, very, very long time, and then all of a sudden it started to become sour, or it started making hydrogen sulfide. And then it started getting briny, and so it got shut in. I believe that there's a story that ran in the paper about a kid that was out working or playing one day, and he went over and opened the valve on the well, and the hydrogen sulfide killed him. But over time, those plugs deteriorated and failed, and the interesting thing is that once it starts, and we found hydrocarbons in the water samples, it has reverted back to an oil and gas well, beyond no doubt. And so it should become the onus of the Railroad Commission to be able to plug it. It was drilled as an oil and gas well, handed over as a water well, but then it became an oil and gas well again once it started producing hydrocarbons. And it's flooded 60 or 70 acres. It's extremely toxic, elevated levels of radium-226 and 228, and it's producing about 600 gallons a day.
Wow. So we've been left with this legacy of oil and gas. And I mean, here in Abilene, Texas, we're right on we're neighbors with the Permian Basin. We supply a lot of geologists and instrumentation and work and labor to the oil and gas field. It's done a lot of great things for our economy. But here we are in 2026 with real environmental and ecological issues. And since you came back to the States, being in oil and gas your whole life, fourth generation, recognizing this is a real issue, you decided we need to do something about this.
Yeah, I decided to stay. I could have I was living in Bali, Indonesia. Lived there for 15 years, and I had some really late nights and keeping me awake with some internal dialogue with myself. I mean, should I go home to Bali to my pristine golf course and my white sand beaches and say this is y'all's problem, or should I stay on and use my skill set to try to turn things around? And I'm not going to lie. I mean, there were some pretty late nights making that decision, and I just finally just decided that Texas was bigger than me, and that I could always get back to Bali, but these people might not be able to find somebody else to help them. So I decided to stay. So it was it was an excellent decision. And I hadn't been back to Bali in 4 years, over 4 years since I left, but this is where I need to be. And I got sent here, and I can help, and I can raise issues, and I can show, and I can't only show, but I can tell, and I have the expertise for people to understand. And it's not just in West Texas that we're experiencing these problems. And I said something like 3 years ago, when you look at the Haynesville on the other side of the state, and all the activity in Louisiana, and Louisiana's gotten smart where they've reduced the number of permits that they're given for injection wells, and they've reduced the volume of produced water they can inject. So all that water comes across the state line back to Texas. And there's commercial saltwater disposal wells all over right on the state line. And so all that water's coming over here. And now there's people on the state line that are starting to see increases in TDS in their well waters at home, and increased amount of sulfides, which is a clear indicator of produced water intrusion. So yeah, it's happening over there. I got a call from a lady down close to Brenham that turned on her kitchen faucet and started spraying natural gas at her. And I know back in the 90s they drilled a bunch of gas wells over in that area. So this is a statewide problem. I highlighted West Texas because that's where I spent most of my time, and that's where I was embedded the deepest. But it's happening all over the state, and people really need to pay attention. Don't let the misnamed Railroad Commission throw them off. It's one of the most important races in the state, and that's what I think. That's why they won't change the name, is because they can continue to operate the way they operate.
Yeah, that misnomer keeps them in the closet.
And nobody pays attention to them, right? So it's unfortunate. I've always been a big supporter of changing the name, and make it the Texas Energy Commission. We've got thousands of people moving to the state every month, and these people are going to set up homes, and they're going to be stakeholders in the state, and they need to understand what the agency does.
So I've got a letter here that you wrote about a year ago in April to Chairman Charlie Green and members of the Texas House Committee. And I'm not going to read this whole letter, Hawk, but getting to some of the things that you're proposing that we can do to help solve this issue, or at least work it out. I thought this was kind of interesting. So you respectfully urge the legislature to limit shut-in status to no more than 5 years without production or an approval reactivation plan. 15 years is too long.
Yeah.
Can you open that up a little bit?
They passed Senate Bill 1150, and they were pretty happy with it. And that was about the Senate bill, where if you idle a well for 15 years, then that's all you get, and you have to plug it. A life cycle of a well is between 30 and 40 years, and that's if you take care of it. Okay, and that's pretty much reasonable what you can expect out of not assuming production. Let's talk about the hard steel that's in the ground and in that surface. If you walk away from a well for 5 years, more than likely you're not going to come back to it. It either costs too much to produce that well, it's not productive, or you've got some downhole integrity issues with it, and it costs you too much to fix. So you can idle these wells, and you keep getting permits to keep them idle. And currently at the moment, that bill hadn't got started yet, as far as I know. But you can idle them until Kingdom Come. And typically, what operators will do is they will idle a bunch of wells, and then they end up passing them to another company or another LLC, putting them in another LLC, and it just keeps getting passed down. These wells never get plugged. And I'm of the position where if you idle a well for 5 years, and you walk away from it and you're not going to do anything with it. Now, if you have a plan that, look, we shut this thing in for 5 years, we really don't have a lot of money to go fix this thing right now, but we think that within 5 years we can come in and do a workover and restore the integrity of this well, and we can put it back in production, then I don't see a problem with that. But I feel like this bill in the 15 years is going to leave a lot of loopholes to continue the practice to end up
Passing
eventually dumping these wells on the state as orphans.
Or the landowners.
Or the landowners, yeah.
So the next point you made here is update bonding requirements to reflect true plugging costs.
Right. So the bonding requirements in this state haven't been changed in decades, and it's nothing. Whatever bond you put up, and it's on a scale for how many wells that you have, and it's not enough. So in order to start to prevent the continuation of orphan wells dropping on the list, what I have been talking about was, let's just say in one district, in one Railroad Commission district, at a certain depth, or certain footage of a well, let's say the average is $60,000.
Okay.
So if you go in to get a new drilling permit to drill a new well, before you get that permit, you need to put that $60,000 into a fund. That $60,000 stays with the API number of that well. So anytime there's a well, there's an API number. And so, like a Social Security number, okay? So that $60,000 stays with that well for the lifetime of that well. And it doesn't matter how many times that well changes hands. Let's say by some miracle that you drill the well, you put the $60,000 up, and you end up being the one that plugs it 20 years down the road. Well, guess what? Here's your $60,000 back. You've already paid the plugging costs. If you sell that well, if you sell it and somebody sells it and somebody sells it, and then Joe Bob gets it and Joe Bob goes bankrupt and it becomes an orphan well and the state has to pay it, guess what? We've got $60,000.
Yep.
And we do this enough and draw enough interest. This interest is going to the orphan well fund, and we're able to plug more wells. Now, the Railroad Commission does like to brag that they plug a lot of wells, and I've seen how they operate. And I've dug up some of their wells that they plug, and they're not plugged. Putting cement in a well is not plugged. And there's certain things that need to be done to ensure that it stays plugged. I'm a big, after this antenna project, I'm a big supporter of monitoring a well for 6 months to a year after you plug it to make sure that it doesn't pressure back up again.
Makes sense to me.
And then you can come back and you can cut it off and you can say that it's plugged. I don't know why we do that. There's little bits and pieces that need to be changed in the way that we do things, using different materials to plug the well with, different cement blends. I've got a landowner that has 200 orphan wells on his ranch, and I talked to him. I said, if I ever got elected, could I use your ranch as a laboratory, and we could try new materials, new techniques, and trying things. And he said, by all means. He said, I just want to get my wells plugged.
Yep.
And these wells have every imaginable problem with them. They have shallow abnormal pressures. They've got parted casing, fish in the hole, and anything that you can think of. And what a fantastic laboratory it would be to try new things. And within a space of 3 to 4 years, you can prove up and have new materials that you can have approved to use. So that way we don't have to come back and dig them up every 50, 60, 70 years and redo it again. There are operators that do go way above and beyond the way they plug a well, and it's small guys. And I'm really impressed with what they do. But for the most part, and I tell people, nobody likes to pay for a funeral. And they want to do it as cheaply and as efficiently as possible and get on to the next one. And unfortunately, we've proven that, you really can't be doing that.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like there's not really a standard operating procedure for this.
There is, but it's on paper.
Right.
And there's no cookie cutter solution.
Right.
Every well is like a human being. We're all different, okay? And there's different situations and different conditions downhole. So you can't really prescribe a one size fits all solution to these wells. You can look at it on paper and say, we're going to put a plug here and a plug here and a plug here, without examining the integrity of the casing, whether or not there's any holes in it. Look at the history of the well. I mean, I love to give people the example. A 70-year-old man comes into the emergency room and he's non-responsive. You just don't go and put a pacemaker in him. You know, there's a battery of tests that need to be run. You know, there's blood work, there's EKG, there's, you know, oxygen level, is he bleed, and you run this whole battery of tests, and then you may not come up with a pure diagnosis of what's wrong with him, but at least you have a starting point of how to start to treat the patient. And these old legacy wells need to be treated the same way. They typically won't be because, you know, it's going to cost more.
Yep. Well, that's interesting. Okay, the next thing, prioritize high-risk wells, especially near water sources and communities. And we really haven't gotten into water yet today.
Yeah, you know, when I'm from Longview, and there's several orphan wells, you know, around a school there that haven't been plugged. And the Railroad Commission does have a risk matrix, the way that they, you know, choose which wells are going to be plugged. I want to use new technology. I want to bring AI into it, and I really believe that this will help. And I've even talked to some college kids about it, and they're excited. But I would like to be able to look at the age of the well, the history of the well, how long it's been orphaned. But I also want to plug in data like the certain area of where the well is, how much has it cost to plug wells in that area. So if we look in northern Pecos County, I know of a well that one well costs $960,000 to plug, another one costs $350,000 to plug. We're spending a lot of money because we're waiting until these wells fail at surface. And so I want to build a risk matrix with AI and plug as much data into it as I can and see where the high risk areas are. This includes homes. You know, we're moving, the suburbs are moving into the rural areas, and everything is growing, and people are starting to get closer and closer and closer to these old legacy fields. And we need to try to predict where the growing areas are, where the most people are going to be moving in the future, where it's going to cost us the most money to plug these wells. And I think we can use AI to generate a better risk matrix and pin down where we need to focus our attention.
I like that. One or two more points here in your letter. Close regulatory loopholes that allow indefinite deferrals.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, you know, you can't be deferring like the Idle Well issue. You just can't keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. Sooner or later, and that's what Senate Bill 1150 is designed to do, is to limit that at 15 years. It's a starting point. I'm not real happy with it, but I'm not mad at it.
It's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. I can't really say that I'm proud of it, but I'm glad that we have something to start with, so that way you just can't defer your idle status forever and ever and a day.
I like that. Last point here. Ensure transparency so Texans know where these wells are and who's responsible.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, when you have an operator and they either form a new LLC and put those wells in a new LLC, or they swap assets with somebody, the landowners just wake up one day and there's a new sticker on the sign with a new name and company. This is 2026. If an operator, or if wells change hands, if they change operators, landowners in the area should at least get an email and go, brand X is now brand Y, or brand X sold to brand Y, and here's brand Y's contact details. And I have landowners that they'll change 2 or 3 times. Is that, you know, I've never even met the pumper, or, you know, I don't know what company is which. I have to look them up, and I've never heard of them before. You know, the transparency. I hate that buzzword, but you know, everybody's saying it now. Yeah, but I hate that. I mean, it's just being truthful. You know, it's like you go to a railroad commission meeting, and if you want to make public comments, you've got to drive to Austin at your expense, get a hotel room, buy your food, and then show up at 9 o'clock, and you get 3 minutes, and then you have to drive home. You know, that's a burden, and people don't want to make that effort to go. They want to be heard, but it's too much of an effort. You know, people have lives. People have jobs. They have kids they got to take care of. You know, kids in school. They can't just drop everything and run down to Austin for 3 minutes to speak. And in 2026, you know, we have Zoom. You know, we perfected that during COVID. Well, why can't you give your public comments from your home or from your office or, you know, from your phone in your car? You know, you can still register and give a topic what you want to talk about. There's a lot of these things in transparency that the agency's going to have to change. I mean, people have to realize the Railroad Commission works for the people of Texas. Bottom line. And you need to be accessible to them. And they need to be heard. And somebody may come in and have something that's totally off the wall, but he's a citizen of this state, and thank you for your 3 minutes.
Last little bit for me here, and then I want to open it up to any questions that our audience might have, if that's okay with you.
No, that's good.
I heard you recently, maybe on a TikTok, mention another proposal, 10 cents a barrel towards wastewater injection.
Yeah.
Unpack that for me.
So the Railroad Commission works on a very limited budget, and they do provide for a third of the state's budget every year, and they're proud to say that. But in their operating budget is very limited. It was last year they had to go back to the legislature and ask for $100 million for emergency funds. We need another stream of revenue that doesn't involve having to go to the taxpayers' money. So with all of this produced water that we're injecting commercially, if we put 10 cents a barrel on every barrel that we inject in the ground, if we're doing 30 million a day, that's $3 million a day. Okay, this starts going into the Orphan Well Fund. This goes into a fund to help incentivize the produced water people to start building their facilities at scale, to start being able to recycle and repurpose this water. And you know, like a good politician, jobs, you're creating jobs because now we have more money, we can plug more wells, we're putting more rigs to work, we're buying more cement, we're buying more tools. It's a good thing, but I can't arbitrarily say that's what we're going to do. This has to go before the legislature. This has to be, and at 55 cents a barrel on the average, I don't see why another dime a barrel is going to hurt anybody. Well, the small guy said, well, you know, we inject in our own formation. Well, that's water flooding. If you produce water and you're injecting it back in the zone from where you're producing, well, you know, that's typically a water flood, and we don't have an issue with that. But if you're injecting massive amounts of produced water in the ground, 10 cents a barrel is not going to hurt anybody. And I lost my train of thought there.
That's
you know, the new revenue stream that it'll generate for the Railroad Commission would be good for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I like all your solutions that you proposed, and I'm certainly going to give you my vote. But let's see if there's anybody in the audience. Anybody have a question for Hawk? We've got a microphone we could pass around. No questions? Someone's got to have a question. Sam?
Come
I
on.
don't have a question.
No?
I love questions. Talk to me about my TikTok account.
Anybody? Well, I mean, that's how I found you, Hawk. And I will say this. I generally don't get too politically engaged in anything, but this is my home state. Like I said, Abilene is, I mean, we drill here in town, but we're definitely neighbors to the Permian Basin where we hear a lot about these issues. And, you know, I saw you on TikTok and I thought, oh, here's a guy who seems to have some solutions, and you're not just passing the buck forward. I don't get the impression from you that you're running to gain more personal power or your own legacy in that way. I get the impression that you're a guy that you've been all around the world. You've been working with blowout issues of natural gas and oil all over the world, and that you want to show the world that Texas is the best, and we need to take care of what we've done here.
Yeah, I think the big motivating factor is in the last 4 years in all this litigation is I saw millions being spent trying to save a ranch. And I see landowners having to hire lawyers all across the state. And a landowner should never have to hire a lawyer to do the job of the Texas Railroad Commission. You know, for 4 years I was out on the antenna ranch. The Railroad Commission came out one time. We gave them a 14 or 15 well tour, and we never saw them again. And they could have very easily stepped in and issued orders, replugging orders, and you know, even if it was in litigation. I mean, they love to brag about they're the most powerful agency in the state, but when it actually comes time to do something, oh no, we can't do that.
Right.
And so, you know, this perpetual people having to hire attorneys and spend millions. I know in East Texas over this, they have an operator there that I was told has 70% of the total violations for solid waste disposal in the state of Texas. And the Railroad Commission commissioners gave him 2 new permits for 2 new sites. And he hasn't even cleaned up the one that's got all the violations on.
Yep.
And so,
It's like being rewarded for
they're
bad
building it,
behavior.
you know, people, their retirement in the country, you know, they've got 8, 10, 12 acres, you know, in pine trees, and that's where and they're building it right down a county road, and they're building it right across the street from these people. One facility is going to be built, I think, within 1,200 feet of a community water well, a municipal water well. And
We do have a question from the audience.
Oh, good.
yeah, sure.
Yes, I was just wondering, where do citizens of the state of Texas go to learn more about what the Railroad Commission is doing on a regular basis?
I would follow Commission Shift. They are an industry watchdog. They are watching the Railroad Commission. They're a great bunch of people. They're nonpartisan. It's not for profit, but they are heavily involved in being a watchdog for the Railroad Commission. Commissionshift.org, I think they are. Great bunch of folks down there. They're in every Railroad Commission meeting. They follow the Railroad Commission's decisions. They're working on looking at the rules for the Senate Bill 1150 to make sure that there's no loopholes. They do a lot of great work, and those were the people that that I would follow and read up on and to get the real deal. If you go to the Railroad Commission website, it's all unicorns and rainbows. And on their social media, every Friday they come out with, you know, Photo Friday, and it's always some beautiful scene. It's a deer or a goat in Pecos County. But then, you know, if you really wanted to look at what's happening in Pecos and Crane County, you know, you'd see wells coming apart at surface and crude oil flowing across the ground. I mean, that's what the actuality is. You know, their public relations department needs to come out and get in the truck with me and let me show them what's actually going on.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the audience? Good. Well, so early voting starts next week, Wednesday, the 17th.
The 17th.
Your name's on the ballot.
My name's on a ballot in every county in the state.
Perfect. And then voting is March 3rd.
March the 3rd.
So we're like down into crunch time.
Yeah,
now.
we are, and I told someone earlier today. I said the reason why the price of oil is staying up is because I'm buying a lot of gas. Yeah, I've been all over state. I'm not making it everywhere. There's 254 counties in this state. It's hard to get. Everybody says come here, come there. I'm trying to be centrally located where people can come and trying to get in front of as many voters as possible. And we'll see what happens. There's 5 of us in this race. It's going to go into a runoff. I'm extremely positive that I'm going to be one in the runoff. So we'll continue this until May. But it's very important for me to make a big run at this. And you know, if it doesn't work out, and you know, folks choose other people, then I've already got my eye on another 300 wells to dig up.
Perfect. Not heading back to Valley. Not heading back to Valley. Well, Hawk, I really appreciate your time today. Is there any kind of final thoughts that you want to leave us with?
No, just you know, if you're not following me on social media, please follow me on social media. My website is hawk4texas.com. The press has been real good to me. The Chronicle, as you said, the Bloomberg, Mother Jones did a fantastic article. And I posted some newsletters, some thoughts, you know, that people can kind of pick my brain without having to go in there, because it's pretty scary. And you know, I want folks to get to know me and realize what I stand for, and that and how important this race really is.
Yeah.
If we don't turn the corner now, we may never make that turn.
We may not recover
That's correct.
unless we can figure out some other technology, which we may in the future
Yeah.
figure out something. But I really appreciate you putting your name in the hat and doing all the travel that you're doing and coming here in Abilene and stopping on the Travi Wavi today too to share your message. It's you're doing good work, man. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate you having me here.
It's good. Well, look up Hawk Dunlap, everybody. He's on the internet. He's on TikTok. That's how I found him. I invited him on the channel, and he said, "Here's my number," and we talked on the phone. I mean, you're very approachable, and I really appreciate that too. You'll certainly get my vote.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap it up today, friends. I hope that you enjoyed this special presentation of the Travi Wavi with Hawk Dunlap running for Railroad Commission. Get out and vote. We still have power as citizens in this country, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Our vote really does matter. So please get out and vote. Thank you, live audience, for being here today. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Sam Wolf and Tim Prozier, our producers, and making this all happen from the Neon Parrot Live Studios. Come down tomorrow morning. We got another character from the storybook capital of America, and we just really appreciate you listening today. Please share this with your friends. Let everybody know what we're doing here and who to get behind. Hawk Dunlap.
Thank you.
Thanks again, my friend.
You bet.
Signing off from the Travi Wavi. Thank you, guys.